20 truly disturbing stories about cruise liners, laid out across 7 levels, like the steps of a giant iceberg. Here, there is everything, from an enraged family quarrel that ended with the death of a woman in her own cabin, to an unthinkable storm that took the lives of more than 450 elderly tourists. And the deeper we descend, the more clearly we understand that the ocean does not forgive mistakes, even if you are on a giant ship that looks indestructible. Level 1. Jessie Harper Mosey, the mystery of SS CNB. Jessie Harper Mosey, who was often mentioned in documents as Mrs. Benjamin Mosey, was a calm schoolteacher in her early 50s, already retired. At the end of July 1940, she boarded the liner SS City of Cleveland, SSC CNB, which was setting out on a voyage across Lake Erie. Mosey took with her a substantial amount of cash and several expensive diamond rings, the very pieces of jewelry that always drew attention. On the ship, she was assigned a personal maid, whose duty was to assist her throughout the entire journey. It was this young employee who became the last person to see Jessie alive. When, a few days later, the ship arrived in Cleveland, Jessie was no longer on board. She had disappeared, as if dissolved into the air, together with her money and jewelry. But the strangest thing was not even that. No one from the crew raised the alarm. Her absence went unnoticed for a full 2 weeks. Only later, a woman's body washed ashore near Geneva on the lake. But it was almost impossible to recognize Jessie in it. Her face and body were covered with severe bruises. Investigators immediately understood. This was not an accidental fall overboard. On her hands, they found traces of thick, dark grease, the kind used in crew quarters and technical areas. This meant only one thing. Before her death, the woman had ended up where she was not supposed to be. Her personal belongings were gone, and the maid who had been looking after her simply evaporated. She left the ship and never appeared again, neither in police reports nor in towns where she could have been hiding. Everything pointed to her, but the evidence was pitifully scarce. Jessie was buried in an unmarked grave. By the time she was found, no one could recognize her face. The investigation fizzled out before it even properly began. SSCNB continued to sail for many more years as if nothing had happened, until it was finally decommissioned. Carnival Triumph. Cruise in Hell. The name Poop Cruise sounds almost funny, but everything that happened on the liner Carnival Triumph in February 2013 was anything but amusing. The ship departed from Galveston, Texas, on a 4-day journey, taking on board more than 4,000 passengers. For the first days of the trip, nothing foreshadowed a catastrophe, until, on the 3rd day, a fire broke out in the engine room. The fire was extinguished almost immediately, but the damage turned out to be colossal. The vessel lost its main power supply. Carnival Triumph was left immobilized in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, without electricity, without air conditioning, without lighting, without anything that makes a liner look like a place for rest. And that was when the real multi-day nightmare began. Without electricity, the sewage system failed. The toilets stopped working, and raw sewage began to rise through the pipes, spilling into corridors and cabins. Passengers later said that the decks turned into a layered lasagna of filth and toilet paper. Floors, walls, everything was soaked with what should never leave the sewage system. The lack of ventilation turned the humid, hot air into a suffocating mixture, and food became a problem. People had to make do with cold sandwiches and limp ham. It is not surprising that against the background of hunger, stench, and heat, fights started breaking out, sometimes very violent ones. Only on the 5th day did tugboats reach the ship, but that was exactly when the weather turned bad and masses of sewage started sloshing around the decks. Passengers said they could hear that disgusting squish, as if the very innards of the ship were endlessly churning under their feet. Finally, the liner was towed to Alabama. Later, it emerged that the company's management knew about potential problems with the electrical system, but still did not cancel the cruise. A journey that had promised to be a luxurious vacation turned into a real hell, and into a trauma that many still recall with a shudder. Level 2, George Allen Smith IV, The Disappearance on Brilliance of the Seas, July 2005. 26-year-old George Allen Smith IV and his newlywed wife Jennifer went on a honeymoon cruise on the liner Brilliance of the Seas, which sailed across the Mediterranean Sea. A week after the wedding, romance, sun, glasses of champagne, until the morning brought anxiety. Under the balcony of their cabin, traces of blood were found. But George himself was nowhere to be seen. When the liner arrived in Kusadasi, Turkey, the man was declared missing, and the strange stain became grounds for an investigation as a probable murder. Neighbors in nearby cabins claimed they heard dull thuds during the night. George, quite drunk, had been losing money in the casino and hanging out with 4 young Russian-American passengers. These men turned out to be the last people who saw him alive. Jennifer, meanwhile, was found unconscious in a corridor after their drinking together. The 4 men were questioned, but nothing could be pinned on them. They insisted they had walked George back to his cabin, even helping him take off his shoes and putting him to bed. Royal Caribbean initially stated that George might have accidentally fallen overboard, but there were far too many inconsistencies. In the end, the company paid the Smith family compensation, approximately $1.1 million. The investigation dragged on for a full 10 years and was finally closed in 2015 without a clear answer. Jennifer married again, and George's relatives are still trying to obtain a renewed examination of the case, convinced that this was not an accident. Voyager against Cyclone Valentina, February 2005. The cruise liner Voyager is crossing the Mediterranean Sea, not even suspecting that it will soon find itself in one of the most dangerous storms of the decade, Cyclone Valentina. According to eyewitnesses, wave heights reached from 40 to 50 feet. Rescue helicopters that flew up to the ship filmed footage that later spread all over the world. The giant vessel was literally being tossed and hurled around, as if it were not a steel behemoth, but a tin toy. Storm force winds of 9th, 10th degree battered the deck, smashing everything in their path. One especially powerful wave broke the windows on the bridge and flooded the electronics, knocking out the control systems. The crew was forced to take manual control directly from the engine room, where they usually do not battle storms, but monitor the mechanisms. Ceiling panels were torn down throughout the ship, and furniture flew along the corridors like dangerous projectiles. Passengers were not just asked, but begged to stay in their cabins. One person later said, "A friend of mine called me from the ship." According to him, the crew worked like a single organism. They calmed people, brought them water and food, and watched over everyone. They did not let us feel that we were alone. Despite the terrifying footage of destruction, the ship miraculously did not lose a single person. The engineers managed to restore the electricity, at least partially, and Voyager made it to port on its own. But that storm remained forever in the memory of the passengers, as the night when the sea decided to show who is actually the real master of this element. Lee, Norwegian Spirit. Lee's story is much more recent, but no less tragic for that. In August 2024, the liner Norwegian Spirit was finishing a 6-day journey through Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. Lee, a man from Taiwan, was standing on the upper deck enjoying the view when he lost his balance. A coincidence, just a moment, and he was already falling from a tremendous height. There was no fight, no suspicious circumstances. A family on a lower deck accidentally filmed the fall on video. To the crew's credit, unlike in Kirby's story, the reaction was instantaneous. Alarm, stopping the ship, lifeboats in the water. The vessel remained stationary for nearly 40 minutes while the crew desperately tried to find the man. And they did, but too late. Despite the quick actions of the medics, Lee could not be saved. Later, the police confirmed that there were no signs of foul play. Everything indicated an accidental fall. Level 3, Carnival Legend, a brawl on board. A cruise is a show, relaxation, and rest. But sometimes the sea challenges you not with a storm, but with people. In 2018, Carnival Legend set off on a 10-day journey across the South Pacific. But on board, there was a family of 23 people who seemed to have come on the ship specifically to look for conflicts. Passengers said that from the first minute this group behaved aggressively. They provoked arguments and looked to start fights. Gradually, the tension increased until it turned into a chaotic mass brawl where fists, feet, and even furniture were used. People in panic locked themselves in their cabins, trying to escape both from the violent passengers and from security, who, judging by the video recordings, did not always act correctly. In the footage, you can see security officers throwing people to the floor, kicking them, and taking away phones to prevent the filming of the riot. In the end, about 30 people were injured. The situation got so out of control that the captain was forced to change the route and enter the Australian port of Eden, where the police removed the troublemakers from the ship. 6 men and 3 teenagers were expelled by force. The company later stated, "The safety of our guests and crew is our priority. We adhere to zero tolerance for behavior that disturbs the peace of other passengers." But for those who found themselves inside that chaos, that cruise forever remained a journey from hell. Sarah Kirby, Carnival Destiny. Sarah Alessandra Badley. Kirby was a 30-year-old woman who decided to throw herself a small celebration. Together with her fiancé, she went on a 5-day Caribbean cruise on the liner Carnival Destiny to celebrate her birthday and simply have some rest. Everything was going great, until that night. Sarah, like many travelers, relaxed. The bar, the casino, cheerful conversations. But according to her, the staff poured fuel on the fire. The bartenders seemed to deliberately keep selling her alcohol, offering discounts and encouraging her to place new bets in the casino, seeing that she could barely stand on her feet. When Sarah returned to the cabin, she felt sick and went out to the balcony to get some fresh air. She leaned on the railing and instantly lost her balance. The fall was long and excruciating. She plunged 7 decks down and hit a life raft, which only worsened her injuries. Her fiancé and friends witnessed the fall with their own eyes. Passengers screamed, called for help, but the crew's reaction turned out chillingly indifferent. The captain did not turn the ship around and did not even reduce speed. The vessel continued moving forward for another hour and a half. Only later did the crew realize that this was not a false alarm, but a real tragedy. When the liner finally turned around, more than 2 hours had already passed. All that time, Sarah was in the cold, dark water, exhausted, broken, barely alive. After the rescue, she was given only minimal help, painkillers, and no attempt to evacuate her to a hospital. On shore, doctors were shocked. She had broken ribs, damaged eye sockets, serious lung bruises, hemorrhages, and hematomas. Sarah filed a lawsuit against Carnival Cruise Line, accusing the company of negligence of its staff and incompetence of the ship's doctors. And judging by her injuries, it was hard to deny that. Level 4. Samantha Broberg, Carnival Liberty. Samantha Joyce Broberg, a 33-year-old mother of 4 children from Texas, decided to spend a short vacation away from everyday worries. She was on the liner Carnival Liberty for only 1 day, and that was enough for the journey to turn into a tragedy. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, surveillance cameras recorded Samantha going up to the 10th level of the ship. She climbed over the railing and, losing her balance, fell into the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. There was no one on the deck. No one could shout or signal. In the morning, her friends, not finding Samantha in the cabin, went to the crew, but received only a formal, "We will check." An official notice to the Coast Guard was sent only 8 hours later. The Coast Guard combed a huge area for 20 hours, but the search yielded no result. Samantha's body was never found. Later it came to light that during the night, she had been heavily supplied with alcohol. Her husband filed a lawsuit, accusing the cruise company of excessive serving of drinks and of slow reaction, but the court did not recognize the company's responsibility. Angelo Faliva, Coral Princess. Angelo Faliva, a 31-year-old Italian sous chef, worked on the liner Coral Princess. On the 25th of November 2009, he suddenly left his post during dinner service and never returned. He was last seen entering a service elevator that led to the garbage chute area, which opened directly to the ocean. And then, silence. He simply disappeared. His absence was noticed quickly, but the investigation began 10 days later, and even then, only formally. Only one colleague of Angelo was questioned. She quite reasonably wondered if he really jumped at night. Why did nobody hear a splash? Why did no camera record him? Later, his family was told that a lifebuoy was missing and that someone had pulled out signal flares nearby. There were clues, but no follow-up. Angelo disappeared without a trace. His family is still seeking to have the investigation reopened. Marion Carver, Celebrity Mercury. The story of Marion Carver has almost become a legend among those who follow maritime investigations, not because of mysticism, but because of horrifying negligence. Marion, a 40-year-old poet and former investment banker, loved spontaneous trips. Just as impulsively, she booked a 7-day cruise on the liner Celebrity Mercury, which was sailing from Seattle to Alaska. She arrived with light luggage, only 2 bags. A steward recalled that she seemed calm and even inspired by the upcoming journey. He brought her a couple of sandwiches, and that was the last time anyone saw Marion alive. The next day, the steward discovered that her cabin looked as if nobody had spent the night there. The bed was untouched. Her things were neatly in their places, and Marion herself had vanished. The steward reported it to his superiors, but there he was simply told to forget about it and keep working. No search, no protocol, no notification of the family. When the cruise ended, Marion's belongings were simply packed into boxes and donated. The police and the FBI were notified only 5 weeks later. 5 weeks that could have changed everything. Her father, Kendall Carver, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on private detectives. He claimed that the ship's documents bore signs of deliberate concealment of his daughter's disappearance. The company resisted the investigation and stated that Marion had allegedly taken her own life. But without evidence, it was impossible to prove either one or the other. Marion was never found. Her father created the organization International Cruise Victims, which to this day fights for stricter safety rules and accountability of cruise companies. Cameron Robbins, Blackbeard's Revenge high school graduate. Cameron Robbins went to the Bahamas to celebrate his graduation. On the 24th of May 2023, he found himself on the pirate-themed ship Blackbeard's Revenge. Party, music, laughter, everything was going as usual until a group of teenagers started daring Cameron to jump into the water. They tried to stop him. Friends grabbed his arms and asked him to calm down. But Cameron, apparently under the influence of alcohol, still jumped. Around him was darkness, black water, current. The video that got onto the internet still provokes arguments. Some are sure they see movement in the water resembling sharks. Others believe it is a shadow or a recording artifact. But the area near the atoll where Cameron jumped is indeed considered a place where predators are often seen. The crew threw him a lifebuoy, but the young man seemed not to see it. The current was carrying him away. Seconds later, he disappeared, simply dissolved into the darkness. The search began immediately. The United States Coast Guard, local services, boats, helicopters. For several days, they managed to keep hope alive until the operation was stopped. Cameron's body was never found. He was officially declared dead. Level 5. Yang Wenjuan, MV Macau success. This story received surprisingly little attention, although it is one of the most shocking on the whole iceberg. A Chinese couple, Yang Wenjuan and her husband Wang Wei, boarded the cruise ship Macau Success. Already in the first hours, arguments started between them, which quickly escalated into an open conflict. The first witness stated that he saw Wang grab his wife by the head and hit it several times against the deck railings. While he ran for help, the couple had vanished. Only Wang remained, standing alone among drops of blood. He claimed that he had tried to restrain his wife when she allegedly wanted to throw herself overboard, and that the blood got on him during the struggle. Then his story became even more absurd. Wang insisted that his wife lost consciousness and that he carried out her long-standing wish to be buried at sea. That is, he simply threw her body overboard. This explanation shocked even seasoned investigators. When Wen Huan's body was found, experts saw that the woman had been beaten beyond recognition. A broken arm, multiple deep bruises, torn wounds, everything indicated a prolonged, brutal fight. Her death resulted from drowning, meaning she was still alive when she ended up in the water. Wang Wei was arrested, and the case was recognized as criminal. But little is known about his subsequent fate. Investigations in China rarely become public. Nevertheless, the story of Yang Wenjuan remains one of the most vivid examples of how a cruise filled with lights and music can turn into a nighttime nightmare. Amy Lynn Bradley, Rhapsody of the Seas. Missing person is a term that appears frequently in shipboard investigations. But the case of Amy Lynn Bradley stands out because decades later, it remains surrounded by the darkest theories. Amy, a 23-year-old young woman from Virginia, went on a cruise with her family after her father received the tickets from his company. Her father last saw her early in the morning of the 24th of March, 1998. She was sleeping in a chair in their cabin. When he woke up again, she was gone. Her sandals, lighter, cigarettes, everything remained inside, as if she had just stepped out for a minute. The family immediately turned to the crew, begging them to block the stop in Curaçao so that a search could be organized. But the liner still allowed passengers to disembark, which made the search almost useless. Anyone could have taken Amy away unnoticed. The day before, Amy and her brother had spent time in a bar with a member of the ship's musical band. Later, her brother recalled something strange. The musician came to offer condolences before the disappearance was publicly known. That looked like an inadvertent slip, that he knew more than he was saying. Nevertheless, he was checked on a polygraph and released. Amy's trail vanished, but not forever. Years later, a Canadian tourist reported seeing a young woman strikingly similar to Amy in a restroom in Curaçao. The woman whispered anxiously, "They will not let me go." Another witness, a United States Navy officer, claimed he met her in a brothel in the Caribbean. She asked for help, but two men roughly dragged her away. The family is sure that Amy was abducted for human trafficking. The FBI still has not closed the case, but where she is now, no one knows. Miki Kasaki, Island Escape. 52-year-old paralegal Miki Kasaki went on a cruise together with her ex-husband Lonnie Kakantes. They were trying to rekindle their relationship and smooth over past disagreements. Or at least, that is what friends of the couple thought. But one night, Miki disappeared. Lonnie said she went to get some water and never came back. 2 days later, her body was found off the coast of Pozzuoli, Italy. Initially, investigators believed that the woman had taken her own life. But soon, the autopsy showed something else. Miki had been strangled and suffered a severe blow to the head before she ended up in the sea. In other words, she had been murdered. But the investigation stalled until 2013, when the FBI discovered Lonnie's financial moves. Shortly after Miki's death, he withdrew $1 million from her account and tried to change her will to get all the property. In 2020, Lonnie Kakantes was found guilty of first-degree murder and received a life sentence. Rebecca Coriam, Disney Wonder. Rebecca Coriam, a 24-year-old crew member of the liner Disney Wonder, worked with children. In March 2011, she disappeared without a trace, leaving behind many questions and almost no answers. The last CCTV footage of her was recorded at about 5:45 in the morning. Rebecca, in a blue t-shirt, was talking on the phone and was clearly upset. A colleague walking by asked, "Are you okay?" She responded briefly, "Yeah, I am fine," and walked around the corner. That was the last moment she was seen alive. She did not show up for work at 9 in the morning, and the crew began a search. But the official version, later voiced by management, sounded strange. Rebecca could have been washed overboard by a rogue wave in the crew pool area. However, the pool was surrounded by high walls, and such a scenario looked doubtful. Others said she might have fallen while jogging. But why then were there no recordings from other cameras? Why was the crew barely questioned? Why did the investigation on the liner last less than a day? When her parents arrived on the ship, they noticed a pair of flip-flops among her things that were not her size or style. It seemed a trivial detail, but sometimes it is precisely the details that reveal the truth. The case was closed practically without explanation. Rebecca's family received neither a final report nor the investigation materials, and to this day, they wait for at least some clarity. Camila Peixoto Bandeira, MSc Musica. 28-year-old Brazilian bartender Camila Peixoto Bandeira worked on board MSc Musica together with her boyfriend. She was known as a lively, sunny, sociable girl. That is why the shock was so great when her boyfriend reported that he had found Camila hanged from a pipe in their cabin. But it soon turned out that everything he had said was a lie. Her body was in a sitting position, not hanging. There was no rope, no towel, no object in the cabin that she could have used to kill herself. The captain and the doctor immediately raised the alarm. Experts confirmed that death had come from manual strangulation, not from hanging. The couple often quarreled, and Camila frequently appeared with bruises. Her boyfriend became the main suspect, but when it was time to bring official charges, he disappeared. He fled. The case froze. Camila's family is still demanding justice. Level 6, MS Scandinavian Star, a fiery trap. The passenger ferry MS Scandinavian Star was supposed to be a convenient way to travel from Oslo to Frederikshavn. But this journey in April 1990 turned into one of the worst disasters in European waters. The ship had been converted from a cargo vessel into a passenger one only a few days earlier. The crew was poorly trained, many did not know the language, and safety instructions remained a mere formality. A small management negligence turned into a spark, in the literal sense. The fire started at about 2 o'clock in the morning on the third deck. Passengers themselves ran to the reception desk, shouting about the smoke, and soon the fire, as if a living creature, began climbing up the ship, from deck to deck, using stairwells and ventilation shafts like huge pipes driving the flames upward. The ship's interior finish, made of cheap flammable materials, ignited instantly. Resins and decorative panels released thick, poisonous smoke. People suffocated, lost consciousness on the spot, and many never got back up. The most horrifying thing, the ship's fire safety system almost did not work. The fire doors jammed. Alarms did not go off. The crew could not communicate with passengers. The language barrier, panic, lack of training. People hid in bathrooms and storage rooms, trying to wait out the flames, but the smoke found everyone. In the end, 159 people died, most of them suffocated, unable to get out of their cabins. Many experts later stated that if fire safety had functioned even at half the required level, the number of victims could have been many times smaller. The captain and part of the crew left the ship early, before evacuating all passengers. That decision remained for a long time the subject of investigations and public anger. At first, suspicion fell on a Danish truck driver with a history of arson, but later it became clear that there had been several ignition points, which indicated the presence of not one, but several arsonists. The reason? According to some specialists, insurance fraud. Several weeks earlier, insurance inspectors had already warned that the ship's fire safety system was catastrophically inadequate. But the owners ignored the recommendations. Scandinavian Star became a tragic monument to what happens when safety is sacrificed to savings. Costa Concordia, the captain who wanted to show off. On the 13th of January 2012, the world watched as the huge luxury liner Costa Concordia slowly rolled onto its side, listing toward the sea, like a giant beast fatally wounded. On board, there were more than 4,200 people. It was supposed to be an ordinary week-long cruise in the Mediterranean Sea, but Captain Francesco Schettino decided to deviate from the route and perform an impressive maritime salute to pass as close as possible to the shore of the island of Giglio. According to some witnesses, he wanted to impress a woman who was with him on the bridge. When the hull struck underwater rocks, everything changed in a second. A gaping gash, rapid flooding, loss of control. The ship began to list, and Schettino tried to conceal the incident, telling the Coast Guard about problems with the electricity. Passengers below did not know what was happening. They heard crashes, felt jolts, but there were no official announcements. Only when it became completely obvious that the ship was sinking did the evacuation begin, chaotic, disorganized, and too late. Some people jumped into the icy water, others tried to reach the lifeboats through the crowd. The most outrageous thing, the captain left among the first. The Coast Guard ordered him to return to the ship. The famous phrase, "Get back on the ship, damn it," became a symbol of his shameful flight. The consequences: 32 dead, dozens injured, years of investigation. In 2015, Schettino was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 16 years in prison. And Costa Concordia lay on its side near the island's shore for 2 years until the technologies and billions of dollars were found to raise and tow the giant away. It was the largest passenger shipwreck in modern Europe, and one of the most shameful examples of human overconfidence at sea. Level 7, Christy Manzanares, Emerald Princess, July 2017. Emerald Princess was confidently heading toward Alaska, and on board was the Manzanares family, living in anticipation of a long-awaited vacation. 39-year-old Christy Manzanares, a real estate agent from Utah, was traveling with her husband Kenneth, their 3 daughters, and relatives. It seemed this would be the perfect family trip. But one quarrel in the cabin turned this cruise into something unimaginably horrific. Late in the evening, a serious argument erupted between Christy and Kenneth. Later, the investigation would establish that the woman told her husband that she wanted a divorce. For Kenneth, these words seemed to snap the last thread. He attacked his wife and began beating her with incredible fury, delivering blow after blow to her head. Because of the screams and crashes, their daughters saw part of what was happening. They became witnesses to something that no one should ever see. When the crew burst inside, the scene was horrifying. Blood on the walls, on the floor, on the furniture. Christy was no longer showing signs of life, and Kenneth, covered in blood, gave only one explanation. She just would not stop laughing at me. He tried to drag her body to the balcony, presumably to throw it overboard. But a relative managed to stop him before security arrived. The ship was immediately put into lockdown mode. Passengers were ordered to remain in their cabins while investigators worked at the crime scene. Emerald Princess even made an unscheduled stop in Juneau so that FBI agents could board. Kenneth was arrested right on the ship. In 2021, he pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter and received 30 years in prison. He died already in custody, never really understanding why a single evening erased his entire life. Eastern Star, the instant death of 444 passengers. If most disasters on the water unfold gradually, giving at least minutes to react, the passengers of the liner Eastern Star had no chance at all. On the 1st of June 2015, the ship was sailing along the Yangtze River, carrying more than 450 elderly tourists. The journey was supposed to be calm and picturesque, but nature decided otherwise. Suddenly, a rare but incredibly powerful wind vortex formed over the river. In essence, a mini tornado. From the first gust to the complete capsizing of the ship, less than 2 minutes passed. The liner rolled onto its side almost instantly. People found themselves in darkness, underwater, in enclosed spaces, without even having time to understand what had happened. Some tried to break through to the exits. Some were calling their loved ones. But the river swallowed the ship too quickly. Only 12 people were able to escape, including the captain and the chief engineer. The remaining 444 passengers and crew members died. The Chinese authorities launched a large-scale operation, but information about the rescue efforts and the investigation was tightly controlled. Relatives of the dead said that they were not told the truth, that their access to the site was restricted, and that they were not allowed to ask questions. Later, official inspections confirmed that the tornado was indeed the main factor in the tragedy. But there was also a second conclusion. The crew had been insufficiently trained, and the ship had previously received warnings about safety violations. For many families, this tragedy became not only a loss, but also a deep wound, worsened by the lack of transparency. And that is all for now. If you watched the video to the end, then I recommend subscribing to the channel and giving a like so that you do not miss new videos in the future. And for now, you can watch our 2 previous videos, which have just appeared on your screens.